Just thought I was preparing, and Dave, where I really do believe there is this divine presence, this essence that has touched every one of us here, that has led you here. How is it that, just stop and think of it. How is it that we all come here? Why? What is it inside of us? We don't necessarily even talk to each other, and then all of a sudden we're all here. Like, what is that? That there's this draw, that something is touching us and drawing us and pulling us here together to come together as human beings, as spiritual consciousnesses living in these bodies. Just stop and think about that. Like, how cool is that? That we're all drawn here together, and so we pray to this divine presence, this being of light that calls us. Probably a great example is you think of the sun. It's interesting how, like, human beings have worshipped the sun for all these years. The sun is just this ball of fire giving out warmth and heat and light, and then this God is also conscious, totally aware of us, aware that we're here, and is aware of our quest to grow and develop. And so our prayer this afternoon is that as we gather here and share our faith, that we grow in our awareness of this divine presence that says to each one of us, I know you inside and out, and I love you as you are. As we said last week, you are the beloved son and daughter. To really feel that and own that. Amen.
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 See, you sent your message from the dark side.
From the dark side. Was it Pink Floyd?
Before I get in trouble by Mrs. Karen Vandenberg, can last week we had someone handling the sign-in. Can everyone? It is there. Never mind. Thank you. Thank you so much. I did not sign in. I know.
We did.
I did not sign in. I'm going over my notes from Karen before I get yelled at.
So I'd like to read to you. I'm sure you've heard of this. It's called The Men in the Glass.
Yeah.
So I'd just like to read this to you. Whoops, it went too big. Oh, man.
Drew does not run the technology department here.
What is that thing?
All right? Exactly.
When you get what you want in your struggle for self, and the world makes you king for a day, then you go to the mirror and look at yourself and see what that man has to say. For it isn't a man's father, mother, oh man, or wife. You know what I feel? I don't know how you feel this when you get a phone or you get and then it's like, can you leave me alone? I finally have figured out how to do this. Just leave me be. And you go to the mirror and you look at yourself and you see what that man has to say. For it isn't a man's father, mother, or wife. I'm using gender, but it's women. Whose judgment upon him must pass. The fellow whose verdict counts most in life is the man looking back in the glass. Oh my God. What happens is it gets dark, and then when I touch it, it expands to the point where I can't.
Can you forward it to David and he can blow it up on his screen?
Yes. Can I forward it? No. Yeah, forward it. Here you go, Dave.
But you can do that. You can change your screen timeout too, so it doesn't go.
All right, let me read this real quick. He's the fellow to please, never mind all the rest, for he's with you clear to the end, and you've passed your most dangerous, difficult test if the man in the glass is your friend. You can fool the whole world, down the pathway of the years and you pat you on the back, oh my God. Okay, but your final reward will of heartache and tears if you cheated the men in the glass. Okay. So the point of my reading that so eloquently and smoothly is I was reading something, and it's like it's an interesting thing. Like when we think of our concept of God, like when we could have a discussion over the things that we've learned about God, that like again, like who's going to go to hell or being judged or evaluated and things like that, and that to really almost get beyond like God is not Jesus would in the scripture would refer God as Father, right? Our Father. But like and any more than like God of being mother, but that God is almost beyond gender.
Right.
So God, and of course we don't know, but we'll get into things in terms of near-death experiences as we move into fear of death. But that this God, I like this when I was reading this, and it's like in other words, like God knows each one of us, and so it's almost like. There's no hiding, there's no pretending, there's not like we're going to show like our best self to God or whatever like that, as if like, God's not aware of the totality of who we are, everything that's ever happened in our life, and to really feel like embraced by that. And there's something about that, like you're looking at yourself in the glass, you're looking at yourself in the mirror, and there's that sense of like how important it is for us to be reconciled to ourselves. You hear so many stories of different, I'm sure we could all like tell stories of things that have happened. Very often there's always this feeling of like, my life didn't go exactly the way I wanted it. Things didn't pan out exactly the way I wanted it. This human experience. And we have to embrace all of this. Like, if David is my life, I have to hug him. I have to embrace everything that has ever happened in our lives and say yes to it. And the decisions that we made along the way came from our level of consciousness, our awareness at the time. The research is that many of the decisions that we made in the past were based on a limited knowledge, and oftentimes they turned out to be a mistake. But it was based on what we knew at the time. So we can't Monday morning quarterback in our life. But just get that sense of that this divine presence is these people who have experienced these life after death experiences of just this overwhelming sense of a bright light, of a warmth, of a total embrace, a total acceptance. There's no male or female, and there's no sense of like, I hate to say this, but from what I understand, God isn't Catholic. He's not she, whatever, not Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, so that everything that we do here at Good Shepherd, ultimately, our being here is a means to an end. This is all about helping us to become more conscious, more aware of this divine presence in our life. And I guess the big thing with religion is, how do we take the ritual and various things that we have in there, and how do we make that relevant to lend itself toward that growth and toward that consciousness? But we can never get caught up in some of the incidentals of a religion. So in other words, like, it's always a means to an end, and the problem is it can't be an end in itself. So I like Richard Rohr when he's saying that, first there's Jesus, who is this presence, this essence of this divine love, proclaims this gospel of love and compassion and forgiveness. And then the church moves into defending and arguing who was Jesus. And then the church replaced Jesus. So the gospel of Christ can get shelved for our own self-perpetuation, right? And so that the goal for all of us here is we want to remember and recapture that what we're really all about here is trying to not worship Jesus, but to become and emulate and imitate Christ, in our lives. So what we're going to like to do is, so I wanted to say this in terms of like, God knows everything about you. God, there's no hiding or pretending with the divine. So one of the things that I always love and admire about Dave, and he's always sending me and talking to me and stuff like that, and I love it, but he's like, I'm always inspired because he's got that sense, and I guess like a lot of it is from AA, right? But like that you have that ability to like, he's always looking at himself, this personal inventory. He's, taking understanding himself. What's it called again?
Nightly review.
Right, I've asked it that 6 times. I can't remember. Nightly review. So we're going to talk about that and to impress upon us that we need to do this in our life. We need to have these nightly reviews. We need to look at this person in the mirror and really check in with that person about being honest. You think about like, do you believe in God? You say, well, yeah, I believe in God. It's like, well, what does that mean? I mean, in other words, the bottom line is that we have to integrate who we are, how we behave, how we love, and that really is the true expression of our belief in God. It has to be integrated. You know what I mean? Lord knows there's a lot of examples throughout history of people who believe in God. They could be religious people, they could be clergy, whatever, and yet their behavior is completely not integrated with that, so that it's bankrupt if there isn't this integration of who we are. So Dave is going to talk to us about some of his experiences about nightly review.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, interesting when Drew said the prayer, right, and everybody kind of got quiet. Like a really fun exercise, and I encourage people to do it. Is to look around the room, right? Somebody told me a long time ago, especially like at Mass, when everyone's saying the Our Father, right? Just, I know we want to get into prayer, but sometimes just look at the room, like you were talking about. Something brought us all here, right? I think originally when we talked about doing this type of Lent experience, I really don't think we planned on having the turnout that we ended up having, which is just, we're so blessed and lucky and fortunate to even be able to have this experience. And I know that because originally we talked about really wanting to have a lot of participation and things like that, and then it just became, a lot of people, and it's amazing, and we really are happy. So let me just talk to you a little bit about the night review. We handed it out early on because we wanted to just see if anybody put the practice into their life. We asked that, maybe you just do it once, okay? If you did it nightly, that's fantastic. But ultimately, what I was trying to do was for you to have an experience with it, okay? I'm going to be honest. There's a lot of these things that I did early on that I didn't believe in, right? I had to go like blind faith, right? It was explained to me that most of my life I hit a light switch and it turns on the lights. Well, I don't necessarily have to understand what makes the light turn on and that process. So I'm one of those people that I want to pick through it. I want to figure out exactly what I should do. I want to do it perfect. And what I found that all that did was keep me from moving, from growing. All right, so I had to do some of these things, and they were uncomfortable, right? Like nightly review was uncomfortable at first. Number of reasons. One, obviously, because I was being honest with myself. I was really being honest with God, right? We talked about God sees everything, right? So how honest am I being with God, right? And a lot of times I started to realize that not only was I thinking that I was kind of pulling one over on God, but who was I really pulling one over on was me, So it was through nightly review that I really started to get into some experiences that I was having throughout the day that I could start making some changes, okay? So I'm going to share one, okay? Because I asked everybody to do it, and I just thought it would be fun if, I'm one of those people where I lay it out there. So some people like that, some people don't. I bear with me, okay? I'm going to read. Drew, I'm having technical problems. Drew, where are you, Drew?
Greg.
I need you. Okay. So what I did early on, the first week that we handed out that sheet, I sent, I don't know how many I sent you, but I started sending him my nightly review, just so that is a practice that we practice in fellowships, okay? We send it to other people, so that it's like spot checking, so some people could see what's going on. So I'm going to just go through how I keep mine a little more basic than the one that we handed out, but that was one that I picked off online, right? So when we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Was I resentful, right? And the answer to this question this night, I don't even remember exactly when it was, yes, okay? Felt like Bobby doesn't want me to do anything for Marlon anymore. So what really that had to do with was a company that I used to work for. They were kind of asking me to still come in and work, and someone who was a friend of mine was kind of talking me out of doing it, right? But this is just how I felt. So was I resentful? Yes. I had this, I was re-feeling these emotions, right? That's what resentment is. I re-feel all of a sudden, because really, was I really upset that he was probably had my best interest and wanted me to not do something because I was, limited on time and I have a family and I have church commitments and things like that? Or was I re-feeling some things that our relationship had experienced prior? Okay? So that led me to look at that. Okay? And then I actually took that into, a 4-column inventory and went through that. Okay? And that's where we're going to talk more about that. But I'm going to go fast, right? Was I selfish, right? Yes. I knew Lauren was having a tough day, and I wasn't willing to move my day around to help her. Okay? Now, I write these things down. This isn't so that I beat myself up. It's so that the next day, I remember that the day before, and I'm going to tell you, God is amazing, because the next day, he always gives me that opportunity. He always gives me the opportunity. So the next day, I had an opportunity, and I remember it. It was like I was able to save her a trip, taking one of our daughters to dance, right? And it, rather than her sit in the parking lot or sit at dance for an hour and a half, I was able to do it. I was able to move my day around. So that's one thing it offers me. By reviewing my day, I'm able to maybe have a different experience the next day, because I have an awareness now to where I was selfish, okay? Was I dishonest? This specific day, no, sorry. I wish I could give you, okay? Was I afraid? So this was a question early on that I started to realize, right, I'm a man, right? I grew up with this mentality. Nowadays I can't keep myself from crying. It's amazing. I spent my whole life with these ideals of what a man should be, right? He doesn't cry, he doesn't this, he's not afraid, right? That's what my mind would tell me, that I couldn't be afraid. And what I started to recognize was there's fear in my whole life. And really, I constitute fear simply as lack of faith, right? I either have faith and trust in God, or I live in fear, worry and regret. That's it. It's that simple. I have somebody that's really close to me, and he says that's the number one decision I get to make every day. Either I get to live in fear or I get to live in faith. That's it. And when you break it down like that, it's pretty simple. So this day, yes, I was afraid. This is when I just started my new job, so this makes sense, right? Selling again has me fearful at times, right? I notice that sometimes I just get this little bit of like uneasiness and awkwardness, okay? Do I owe an apology? Yes, right? Lauren needs my help. I should have showed up for her, okay? Have I kept anything that I should have shared with someone at once, right? So we call these immediatelys. They're really, really important. I guarantee you everybody in this room keeps something throughout the course of the day that probably they should share with somebody else, all right? And you'd be surprised sometimes when you pull the cover off of that thing, it loses its power. It loses its, just this turmoil that exists within you usually, right? So yes, and I put here that lately I've been feeling distant from Lauren, right? Now, this isn't like marital counseling. This is that, I need to put a little bit more into that relationship. I need to try to figure out where we could have a date night or something like that. So that's the awareness that came out of that, all right? Let's see here. Was I kind and loving to all? And I put no, right? I was distant, and I, really should have showed Lauren some more love that day. All right. Could I have done something better? Yes. I could have rescheduled a couple things. I could have, to given time to break up Lauren with the girls, especially later in the day. Was I thinking of myself most of the time? Yes. Right. Because I was thinking about I had this new job. I got to sell. I got to be good at it. And really, that's what I was focused on. I also realized this week through a couple night reviews how much I didn't bring God into it. Like I was talking about last week, where I was agnostic in my life, where the end of the week came, and it was funny. I was here at church, and I kind of had an experience where I was like, that's what I missed all week. Right? I wasn't really getting quiet in the morning. I was waking up. I was thinking about the day. And all of a sudden, I realized how for basically 7 days, I might have went through the motions and spent a little time with God, but I wasn't going through my normal practice of getting quiet and sitting and letting, really pushing all that other stuff aside and realizing what was the most important part of my day. Okay? And then... So was I thinking what I could do for others and what I could pack into the stream of life? And obviously the answer to that was no. So let me just tell you what this usually does for me, okay? There's usually a theme every single time. The more I do this, the more I realize, right? So the theme of this one ultimately was I need to show up, right? I need to show up. I need to be part and present in Lauren's life. Sometimes when I'm feeling distant, I'm feeling distant, not because necessarily what's happening with her. I'm sorry, I feel like I'm ignoring this out of the room. A lot of times it's because I'm not participating in the relationship. So it's not that there's actually anything going on between us. It's that I'm not participating in that relationship. Okay? And what we start to see is my actions, especially when they're driven with self and they're not aligned with God's will, I just create chaos in people's lives without even realizing that I'm doing it. And that's what Nightly Review has done for me. So usually I follow Nightly Review with, when I figure out what that theme is, okay, I usually then ask God, listen, thank you for making this all aware, putting this in front of me. Help me to do better tomorrow. Simply. That's it. And then that, for whatever reason, it's funny that like the next day something will be in that book or so. I'll always be given that opportunity. I always tell people, do I owe an apology is the best one, right? Because a lot of times that'll be for somebody that, I can't make that apology, right? I'll think back to a situation, maybe in a store or whatever it may be. I'm never going to see that person again. God gave me an opportunity at that point to act like Jesus did, but I didn't. So what do I do then the next day is I make sure that every single chance I have, I get to do that, right? I say to Drew all the time, for me, when I have to make a tough decision now, it's so easy because I sit down and I say it to you all the time, I break it down. What would Jesus do? A lot of times I don't like what Jesus would have done. Okay? But the answer is pretty clear. The answer is clear, right? It's usually do the next right thing. Do the loving, caring thing. Maybe I go out of my way to do something or and most of the time I don't want to do it. But what I get is every single time I get closer to God when I do these things, right? It leads me into that realm of the spirit where I'm in touch with God, right? When I'm in the bondage of self, I'm blocked out. We were talking before this, and I don't want to steal your thunder, and I'm going to wrap it up. The idea of, I know for me, when I was a kid, I always thought of God as, right, Santa Claus, for whatever reason. That was just a visual that I had, and there was this whole persona of, right, if I do good, I get good, that type of deal. See everything, and that was what Santa. We were talking about the sun, right? And really, if I had to put some type of idea on God, right? And you brought it up, and it really made me think about it, right? Like I talk about that. I talk about living in the sunlight of the Spirit, and how when I change that, and I think about how it's so simple that if I'm blocked from the sun, whether it be clouds, right? But usually it's calamity in my life, is the cloud that keeps me from feeling that warmth, that connection. And I think everybody here can relate to that. I would think so, right? We go out in May, June, when that sun's out there, we could feel that presence, right? That warmth. Yeah. And I can tell you that if you asked me what it's like, I'm not always tapped in, okay? But a lot of times I'm fortunate to make a couple changes in my life and get tapped into that source. That's what it feels like, right? It's that warmth. And I'll bring it back to when we were saying that opening prayer and we were talking about something brought us here. I was just looking around the room and like I got this overwhelming sense of warmth. Like, you know, this was something we talked about upstairs and said, you know, listen, let's just throw something together for Lent. We felt that people maybe would have a little bit, it'd be easier for them to get to the church during the day because Friday night Arise, it was dark in the winter and it just, and just look at what has happened. Like, look what God has done. And I always say this, right? I get to do this. Like, it's such a blessing. It's such a gift that God gives me the opportunity to be present and experience this, you know? And I want to thank everybody. And I hope I wrapped up Nightly Review. If anybody wants to talk to me about Nightly Review, you just want to be really, really careful of beating yourself up with Nightly Review, right? It's not what it's designed to do. It's designed to find that one little thing that maybe I can work on better the next day. Go ahead.
No, I just, in your sharing your nightly review and things that you've gone through, I see, you know, such a commitment is the word that I see as a common denominator. And by you making that commitment at every stage of what you talked about, allowed you to go further with it. So when you commit to something and the meaning of it, then you will follow it through. From 1 to 10, 1 to 100, 1 to 1,000,000. So I think a lot of what you talked about is initially making a commitment, whether it is to this place, to the church, to taking a bath. I mean, that's it. And I really think that you hit it on the head, and I'm really glad that you share that, because it's really an important thing, that we all be a part of it. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of courage. Like, you think of this as he's talking, to ask ourselves, like, do I do that? Do I really stop? And like, you make a good point, you know, like, not like you want to, you know, beat yourself up, but you want to have like a sense of, let me take a look at myself, you know, if I always like when you kid around and say, like, you know, there's two people in this room who could be more loving, right? And we're all like, I wonder who the other person is, right? So we all know, like, at the end of the day, I could have been more loving, I could have been more thoughtful and more tender, and that's good, right? But then there's also that sense of, like, you know, maybe part of the nightly review is, am I loving myself? Am I being understanding of myself? Am I being patient with myself as well? Because there is that tendency to do that as well. So how about that? When Dave was talking, did you think of, like, you know, do I do that? Do I have any kind of a nightly review? What do you think would get in the way of us doing that? Because it takes a lot of courage. Anybody?
Well, it's just following, so you have your nightly review, but it's following through on it. Sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to follow through on certain situations than others.
People that are in, I mean, I hate to say this, I say this all the time about, like, earthlings, right? People that are in fellowships do have a little bit of an advantage because of the fact that I have people around me, right? I have a circle of influence around me that want to know. If I don't do it for a couple of days, somebody's usually calling me. Say, hey, what's going on? I haven't got, like, we have a group of people that usually share it. So it's something to really talk about, you know, within the church, where maybe, you know, we could figure out a way of little groups that feel this bond that can do that. Because you're never stuffing anything then. You're really never stuffing anything. Usually if I don't do nightly review, which, you know, it happens every once in a while, 2-3 days where I don't do it, it's usually because I don't want to let people know what's going on most of the time. So yes, there is that accountability that I am a little bit fortunate of having, so it's something to talk about, because if somebody really wants to get into doing nightly review, they want to share it with me and they want me to share mine with them, I'm an open book.
I'm guessing that it's harder to do a nightly inventory if you're not sharing it.
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
it's, you're like, who's gonna know, who's going to hold me accountable, like you were just saying, that you share it with someone?
Yeah, so this is what I would say. At this stage, right, I can tell you that it's not about sharing it anymore. Okay? Initially
Right,
it
not for
was.
you, right.
Initially I needed that. I needed that accountability because I'm not disciplined. I'm just not a disciplined person. That's just what I've, come to realize. I've realized a couple things as I've gotten older. I can't multitask. I used to tell people all the time that I was a multitasker. Yeah, I'm not. Okay? I'm not. All right? Yeah, I'm not. All right? I think I am. I think it's good when I'm trying to, forget about it.
Only women can multitask.
Yeah, probably.
I admit that I lost that skill.
Yes, and I'm just not a disciplined person. I'm not. So, and now this has become a discipline. Same thing within the morning. What ended up happening was the benefits of it. I started to, like I was talking about, I started to experience God. So if these were the things that led me to experience God, well, then why would I stop doing them? And it's real easy for me now that with the awareness, what we're going to kind of talk about, that spiritual awareness, is that when I'm not experiencing some of those things, it's real easy for me to look back. Early on in sales, it's a good way to look at things, right? Drew was kind of talking about this, right? We live life forwards and then we learn it backwards. It's just the way it is, right? Unfortunately, we don't have all the information to make a decision a lot of times. We make the decision, we go forward, we get more information, and then we're like, oh man, I wish I could have done that.
Hindsight is 20/20.
Yes. So, kind of with that said, is nowadays I have these, I have the ability to know and look back. Like we used to say this, and this is what I was getting at with sales. I used to manage some sales guys, right? And it used to be like, well, they're not doing well. Well, it's simple. We go back, we look at their schedule, we look what they were doing 30 days prior, and if their schedule was all blocked off and it was, family stuff and important stuff, I'm not saying it's not, and they weren't having success, it correlated back to what they were doing. Well, I have that same experience with spirituality, right? When I'm off the beam and not feeling in touch with God, it's simple. I just got to look back at, did I change some of my practices? Am I not really putting the time? For me now, sometimes it's just the effort. Am I just running through the nightly review? Am I really sitting there, right? One of the prayers I say, it's so simple. I just say, God, please let me see the truth. And I say that, it's okay. I say that because, I'm going to curse, right? I have a bullshitter up here that wants to tell me that, hey, everything's okay. You did great today. And then it's like, wait a minute, get quiet. I guarantee you, that went through with fears for me for a really long time, right? I'm not afraid of nothing. I wasn't fearful. Then I started really getting in touch with some fears that I had, right? And I'm not talking about fears of fire or fears of being alone, fears of, not being successful, financial insecurities, all these things that I would start to identify that would come out of nightly review. So what I would say is we lead into, spiritual awareness. I found that the characteristics of spiritual awareness is where it's really at for me. Because, listen, you're not going to be in tune with all these things, but if you start to see those things happening in your life, which I've had some experiences with pretty much all of them on some level, it's amazing. And then that's when that shift happens, right? That shift that we talk about, where all of a sudden, right, I'm living in a God consciousness, right? And for me, early on, like I said, I had to use those tools, right? What would Jesus do? Simple. I got to make a decision. What would Jesus do? I think I've said it to Drew 100 times.
It's one of the things Oprah Winfrey says. She says, when you know better, you do better. It's true.
Which that's a great statement, but I would encourage you that when you're in tune with what God, the power that God will give you to know, you'll do better. Because I think I know everything. And then I bump into walls over and over again. right? And then I want to know why, why did I make a decision? A perfect example right now is, I just made a career change that, I was making really good money doing something that I was just blessed to be able to do. And when it came down to it, I had a great opportunity. The old me runs. Okay, forget about the old job, I gotta go. New job, new opportunity, thank you, 2 weeks, see you later. Took me, I don't know, 3-4 months to make a decision. I had to talk to people. I had to, break it down, pros and cons. I had to really get with God. And what was keeping me? What it came down to was I was afraid of the financial end of it because I was taking a pay cut to go to the other job. So now if I have full faith and trust in God let's face it, I wouldn't be here. So you want to talk about the experience? I took the other job right before we decided to do this. And when Drew asked me to do it, I had availability that I would have never had. So, we talked about, Drew was talking about this last week about how we're the only ones sometimes that can keep ourselves from having the experience that God wants us to have. A lot of times I find that to be my truth. That I'm the reason that I don't get to have that experience, right? Because if I would have stuck with the money and stayed at the job that I was miserable, I wouldn't have this experience. I wouldn't be here getting to do this. All right, we're going to talk about that. There's another opportunity. We're going to continue this maybe in a couple weeks with something, that I get to do because of this, and it's such a blessing. It really is.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Barbara, alcoholic. Just throw that out there. I do a nightly review and I send it to my sponsor every night. And my sponsees send me their nightly review every night. So that's a great discipline. And one of the questions on there was I thinking what I could do for others? And man, I better have something on there, or else I'm going to be bothered if I don't. If I'll look at that and I'll think, wait a minute, what did I do all day? I don't work. What did I do all day? I better have done something for somebody else. This keeps me accountable. It keeps me connected. As David said, it keeps me connected. I need that connection. If I lose my connection, I guarantee you it's my ego that's gotten in the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you made a great point about, like, when you think of, like, commitment, there's one of my favorite psychiatrists is David Viscotti. Passed away, but if you ever Google him, and he made a number of different talks. He did talk radio back in the 80s. And he had one thing that was like commitment. He goes, nothing ever happens in your life until you're committed. And you got to be committed to yourself first. It seems like as if that's like selfish, but it's not. The more, if you're committed to yourself, you then follow that out. So when you think about like what we're talking about here is part of this is like saying, wow, this is so important to become enlightened, to become conscious, to be aware that we are these spiritual beings like in this body. This is like, it's like our body is like, it's like you're leasing a car. You only have it for a little while and then it goes, so that to make that commitment to growing, and that it takes inventory, it takes nightly reviews, it takes practicing these things. We could have this list and we could memorize it and we could take a test and it's like, hey, you got 100, you got all the characteristics of a spiritually aware person. That doesn't mean you're spiritually aware, right? So in other words, we have to let's talk about now implementing this. But what I like to say too is I really believe that when Jesus says this kingdom of heaven is within us, right? Very, very, I said it a million times, such a powerful, powerful line. What are you talking about? The kingdom of heaven is within you. It's in your midst. It's like, so based on what he's saying is, right now, we're in the kingdom of heaven. Wow. Very subtle, right? We're in the kingdom of heaven. And I get this feeling that we're all going to leave our bodies and we're going to experience the totality of this brilliant presence, this light, this colors are so vibrant, this overwhelming sense of being loved, understanding who we really are. It's all going to happen. But I think that Jesus is saying, like, why wait? Why not now do whatever we can to grow and develop and foster this kingdom within us, in our midst, now? Right? What are we waiting for? Now, obviously, I guess there's some sort of limitation. I don't know, maybe that is that not even true, but there is some sort of a limitation being in our bodies. You know, we have these egos and fearing and, you know, like all the, you know, I got to pay my bills and all that kind of stuff. Some people are a little chilly. You know, this will not happen in the kingdom of heaven. The temperature will be perfect. Low humidity. But like, in other words, this is, huh?
I said, for some of us, it'll be pretty hot.
Yeah.
Dave,
Yeah.
here's what I want to know.
Sure.
I took this and I took it seriously, like for a night or two, because I do a nightly thing, but I don't know. It's the other side of it where what I do. I guess it's because of my Roman Catholic guilt, my Irish Italian guilt, you know, all of that kind of stuff. When I start this examine thing with everything that's wrong, I end up feeling like I'm just not enough. I'm just not, and what I do, I start with gratitude. What am I grateful for today? What did I accomplish today? Who did I help today? Who needs my prayers? Thinking, you know, about those kinds of things. It's much easier for me to fall asleep than it is when I do this. Where did I screw up? Because every time all those answers come forward, and then it's just, it feels like it's not good for me. I want to know why I need to do that.
So I'm gonna. I could totally relate. By the way, just the way that I grew up, I could totally relate to everything that you say. And the shift that had to happen for me was, I had to change what God looked like to me. And it was a little bit of an exercise that I had to go through with regards to writing the characteristics of what I thought God was and what I wanted God to be. And when I did that, what came out of that was a better understanding of what God meant to me. And it was given to me pretty simply, right? I have children, and they said, you know, if your child screws up, how do you feel? Do you not love them anymore? And it was through that I worked through this different feeling of how, right, God wasn't looking down. I was just doing this so that I could be a better, you know, I use the word soldier, right? That I could be a better soldier or a better brother and sister to God's children. And that's really, I stopped being constructive with it. It wasn't to beat me up. It was so that tomorrow I can live God's will a little bit better. And I could be more aligned, right? And if God wanted me to just love everybody and bring love into this world, well, then I have to look at where self and things were blocking me. I loved what you said, because really, and I kind of probably missed that, that's a great evaluator, right? I was taught early on that there were three things that I had to do in life. I had to trust God, clean house, which was a tough process, right? Especially when you have some damage and records in your past, and help others. And if I do those three things, I'm good. I'm good. So that's really all it was to see whether or not I was doing those three things, right? Am I trusting God? Is there things blocking me, right? That's part of that cleaning house process. And then, did I help others? So I had to change the way I looked. And it's tough. It's tough because, you know, I went to a Roman Catholic Mass not too long ago. And, there was this, like, I don't know. I had this really, really bad experience, I grew up with the Jesuits. I went to Jesuit high school, I went to Jesuit college, and the Jesuits were great because they had a different...
You can find an excuse for doing anything.
Yeah, they were great, and they had a little bit of a different philosophy, but ultimately, there's this sense of I don't know, like, I'm not worthy. Like, you say it all the time, but I don't know if I've ever experienced it like I did this time. Like, I actually felt like I wasn't worthy to walk into church, and like, what I'm getting at with that is that that's a feeling now that I start to put on God. That experience, I start looking at like that's God, right? Because for the longest time, I thought walking into a church was God, right? I thought I could only experience God at Mass in front of the cross, not realizing that really where I experience God is everywhere, in everyone. Most of the time when I'm blocked from God, all I got to do is help somebody else, and it's amazing how I could see God in them, or that experience changes it. That's like my go-to. When I'm really caught up in self, go do something for somebody else. So, sorry.
Yeah, no.
You
Yeah.
two both radiated. It's like with Karen too. It's like you can tell when you're doing what you're doing for us.
We're so lucky and blessed to have the two of them.
Well, no, we are. We are, really. I mean, that's what it comes down to. What it comes down to is, but yeah, I mean, it's just, this wouldn't be without everybody. That's really what it comes down
Be
to.
without you guys.
So, thank you.
Well, it is interesting. And I don't know. We'll talk about these characteristics of spiritual wilderness, but as we're going to talk about the fear of death, or and then on a positive note of really, the fearing of death is a distortion. Like, so if we're fearing death, you want to start recognizing that you're not seeing it accurately. That people who have experienced this have been brought back to life, or the near-death experiences. Not one person ever fears death. They can't wait for it. But it's interesting, when they do come back into their bodies, every one of them has a sense of mission. Every one of them has a sense of a purpose. So to really get in touch with, like you were saying, you're not working, what am I doing, right? That we're all here, we've got a gift to give, and to share that gift in whatever way we can. And one way is in a community like, say, Good Shepherd. But that it's almost like God is like saying to every human being, I need all of you. Like, I need you to be that voice, to be that expression of love, to be that tenderness, like that, to be my arms and my feet and all that kind of, to be that presence, and to recognize every day that, every one of us is called to come out of ourselves and make a contribution. It could be at a gas station, it could be at a deli, or I should have been nicer to that Best Buy person when I was trying to get that thing for Christmas. What do they run out of burgers at Burger King?
You didn't really say.
I was hungry, so
Not your best moment.
not my best moment, but and maybe that's a personal inventory, so I could have did a better job on that. But
Person ask you what you do for a living?
yeah. Well, exactly. And as much as somebody's there, hey, aren't you the priest over there? Good job. So
that's not me.
Yeah. So, but that's a good point. Like, if we live our life like everybody's aware of us, and like kind of God's aware of us, like, it's funny because they'll say, like, if you go to the bathroom, and this is probably more for guys than women, but if you go into the bathroom and there's somebody else in the bathroom, you're 50% more likely to wash your hands, even if you don't even know this person. Where if you go in the bathroom by yourself, who knows what you're going to do? So it's almost like,
It's accountability.
it's accountability. It's like, yeah.
That was priceless, her reaction. She looked around going,
That has to be a guy anything. I
Just,
hope.
all right, I could have used a better example.
I want to see how many people shake your hand on the way out.
It's something I read. So, yeah.
I heard the rooster crow once.
But you know what is funny though when you say this, like I always feel this with everybody here, like like as I'm reading the story and I'm screwing the whole thing up, it's like I really have that feeling of like it's totally okay. There's just like just acceptance and love. It's great, so it's nice to know. I think
Shows you're human.
exactly,
You
yeah,
wouldn't do that in a Roman Catholic church.
yeah. You always made a mistake or yeah.
Gives me a shot at some comedy too.
Erasers, scissors, whatever, books.
My hands would be like a size and a half bigger.
For being smacked.
Oh yeah, not the knuckles, sister.
Yeah. Little knuckles on, right?
So now let's talk about these characteristics and get some feedback. But I want to say this before we do that, right? So that when you think of like near-death experiences, trying to understand that, and from a scientific point of view, they've done so many researches on the brain and development. So that when you think of consciousness, as if like the brain produces consciousness, what they're discovering is that the brain is a receiver of consciousness. So that consciousness prescinds from your brain.
I don't know the word person.
Is separate from,
Separate from, okay.
yeah, so, sorry. So,
I only went to 2 years of college.
I'm glad you asked because I didn't
I'm
know.
sorry.
I didn't either.
When your
I
brain
apologize.
dies, that doesn't mean the consciousness dies. It's there.
she's
It's
on it.
always present.
exactly. So that when they have these experiences of the heart stopping, and then when the heart stops, the brain stops and everything, and yet there's like these unbelievable accounts of consciousness, aware of the nurse, the doctor, so that the consciousness is distinct from, separate from your brain.
Right.
Now, that's really cool, okay? To get in touch with, you are consciousness. You are an awareness. You are a spiritual awareness living in a body. You're not what you look like. You're not the money you have in the bank. You're not your name. Everybody gives us a name, right? But that who you are is so beyond all of that, right? But to get in touch with that, we're constantly we're inundated. We're born into the human experience. We're born into my name, and I got the. Back in the day, you had the Converse and the PF Flyers, and and you have all of that, and then what'd you get on your test? What did I get on? Oh God, like he's like and you have all of these things that we're immersed with. Who's it better? Who's whatever? There's always this comparison with other human beings, and we grow up in that, and we're enveloped in that, so that when you think about it, like every one of us here on some level. We're not totally in touch with who we are. How we see ourselves, to appreciate how you see yourself to a large extent is not who you are. And that spirituality and coming here is an attempt to develop and understand who you really are. And if we knew who we really are, we would never be afraid of death. And we probably, like kind of what you're saying, I like what you're saying, like that who we are is so much more magnificent than we really appreciate. We don't get how incredible we are. There's a good line, you can only be as big as your concept of God, right? So how about that for a moment? Anybody want to share like a concept of God that they were taught? God is like what?
God is
Punishing.
almighty, God is all things.
All powerful.
Omniscient.
Taking a test in first grade, you would show it, you know,
He was punishing, judgmental.
God is all things, right?
But punishment. When you were kidding when you said like some people are going to be hotter than others,
Well,
right?
I'm just being humorous.
Yeah, no, that's funny. But I mean, but again, it comes out of, right, God is punishing. Like there's a sense of, again, I was kidding around, save us with the rosary, save us from the fires of hell, lead all souls to heaven.
Especially
That-
those
that's
in
what
most
it was.
need of your mercy.
How many kids automatically thought of purgatory rather than heaven?
Yes.
I never
At
could
best, you were going to
understand
purgatory.
That's right.
a waiting room
You know,
before heaven. What is that?
Well, it's if you weren't 100% good, I guess.
Everybody settled.
And what is limbo compared to purgatory? I
Limbo's
just
for
couldn't-
unbaptized babies.
Yes.
They're floating around still out there.
And by the way, do you know the history of the concept of limbo?
No.
They had like the Council of Trent or something in I don't know what year. And it was running late, so they didn't get a chance to talk about what happens when a baby dies before it's baptized. So they put out on the colimbo, which is a column, I guess Latin is for column. They put out here, we got to address what happens when children die before they're baptized. They put it out on the colimbo. And then like 500 years later, they blew the dust off, and they open it up and they go, look at this. I guess they were deciding that unbaptized babies go to limbo.
Oh my God.
And that's how that happened.
Is that where limbo comes from?
Yes.
Oh my God.
It comes from a mistake of understanding the previous council where they put out on the colimbo.
Is that same as tabling for the next time?
Let's shelf it. Yeah. Right. So God only knows some of the stories in history that have like been misinterpreted or misunderstood. So here you have like all these people. Oh my God, we gotta like rush to like the baby is born, and you gotta hurry
That
up and
was
get
my
that
mom.
baby baptized.
My mom was like, for my son or my daughter when she was born, you got to get her baptized right away.
Don't
You
take
got
her out of the house.
Don't take her out of the
It's
house.
don't take her out of the house until she's
Can't take her out of the
baptized.
house.
It's like what?
So there you go. Then look at that's great, right? Because like think of that consciousness, right? And all those people for all those years, we're talking the 50s, the 60s, maybe the 70s, right?
Yeah.
Well, whatever. But like that sense of like, oh my God. So it's like, what are you saying about the divine? That if I don't have water poured over this child's
Ceremony.
head,
Right.
right? Of course, it makes the priest and the church so important, right? Because we've got the ability. Hey, listen, you want your kid to, we're running a special on baptisms. But I mean, all that stuff, or like, you had to have last rites. Hurry up, you got to run to the hospital at 3 a.m.
How about the ladies? You ladies here remember you had to be churched?
Churched.
Yes.
The woman had to be churched, not the
Yes.
guy.
No,
Yeah,
the guy.
yeah.
And churched meant you gave birth, and you gave birth because you had sex, and that was bad and nasty. So, right? I mean, this is what this all
We only did it
comes
after
from.
There
Yeah.
was no pleasure allowed.
There was no.
No, that's the way it
It's
was.
just
No,
my-
we weren't
it
allowed
was-
to intrude.
Oh, it's
You know
so
what's
hard.
remarkable? The popes knew this stuff, and they never did anything about it, for
No,
God's sake.
no change.
You're not the first one who figured that out.
No, so
How about
the
all the popes who knew this all along about, so all these babies, we think of babies, innocent babies, die and that they, oh my God, I can't even,
right.
And well, when I was a very big renegade. And
I
because
thought
what
so.
I did, I'm a bad girl, let me tell you, because I married an Armenian Orthodox man, being a Roman Catholic. And his family was very much into their nationality identity, being Armenian. It's like, Greek Orthodox. And I was Roman Catholic, Polish, Roman Catholic. I ended up getting my babies baptized in the two churches behind each family's back because I just didn't want to hear it. And I'm like, this is a ceremony. It doesn't matter. My babies are good. So
course
I
they
just
are.
was like, just to shut up both sides of the family, I had them go to 2 different baptisms, because it's like, what's it gonna hurt? What's it gonna hurt? And it'll make my life easier.
You get it. But there's almost that belief, right? Like the Armenians are saying, that doesn't count over there, like this,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
or
And my
vice versa.
And then when my mother got wind of it, she wanted the kids to be baptized Catholic first, because she felt that that was gonna count.
That counted more.
I can't even, I can't.
It's just,
Yeah.
yeah. God rest her, I loved my mom, but,
You're not gonna sleep tonight, Kathleen.
So you wanna be aware of like the upbringing, and I love that one of my favorite lines of all time is breakthrough learning ends early in life, right? So very often the tendency is we learn something, once we believe that that's true, the tendency is we don't go back to reinvestigate that perhaps that was a faulty belief or the way we looked at it, right? So that's another thing too here where if you look at the characteristics of, does everybody have this? So that I love this sense of like new beliefs, being willing to change, to open up your mind, to look at things in a new way, you know, to look at this I love that. I just love that consciousness exists and has nothing to do with the physical part of the body, that's you're in that body, and that is eternal. So get a sense, what do you think? Get a sense of that you are never ever going to cease to be aware of you.
eternity.
That death is a myth, right? How often we say sunrise and sunset, and yet the sun isn't doing a blessed thing. The sun's not doing anything. We're doing this,
Yeah.
right? So that the sun doesn't rise and set, and nor do we ever cease to be. So, yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
When I was growing up, I went to parochial school. Sounds like there's a lot of Catholic people here who were indoctrinated, what I call indoctrinated.
Right.
And at the time I was growing up, there was ecumenical council, and they changed the priest from facing the altar versus facing the people. During that time, there was a whole switch, doctrine-wise. I grew up with a punishing God instead of a loving God or a loving Jesus. And so I'm hearing and feeling that you can't hang on to what was shaped. This doctrination was shaped, and a fearfulness, and that you have to be good. On one hand, that is catechism, indoctrination, and it taught us to be good citizens, but it didn't teach you to be spiritual, because in Catholic school we never studied the Bible, and so we didn't know what message it was to be giving us, and I felt that that was a disservice for me personally, until I began to embrace the church and a Bible study kind of thing. So I'm really just posting that because I feel that we're hanging on to some of these old doctrines, and just liberate yourself, because it's love that they're all talking about in this room, and that's what God and Jesus is. It's all about love. So
That's right.
I don't know if that makes any difference for anybody, but that's what I have to share.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Very good, very good.
And you were meant to be here to say that.
What about this so-called, I don't know how you pronounce it, synod that they're supposed to be having?
Exactly.
What will that take, the next 500 years to change 200 and 300 years of backwardness? You know,
Well, of course, I'm not even aware that they're having this.
well, it was on Facebook, and
Okay.
I was going to answer it, and I thought, well.
What's it called?
A synod, S-Y-N-O-D.
A meeting
A
of
synod.
what? It's the,
And wh-
the hoi polloi in the
Won't
Vatican.
change it.
What's wrong with the church? Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, and again, it kind of goes back to that integration thing, right? I mean, like, you know, in a lot of ways, the church is not integrated first of all, embracing all human beings for crying out loud, okay, depending on whatever their sexual orientation is. Or
allowing
if
women
you,
to celebrate
male
them.
hierarchy?
Yeah, the old
what's wrong
boys
with that?
network.
No, yeah, exactly. I mean, like all those things. And well, thank God that they're going to look at it because obviously, and again,
They're gonna allow married priests, but not women priests.
Right. What
That's
happened
the
to
big
celibacy?
change.
isn't that something?
Right.
Yeah.
What is that? It's,
Unclean. We're still unclean.
What happens to celibacy?
Forever.
What happens to celibacy? If they're allowing this?
what?
Well, they're realizing
Punishment for men?
Other? What? Sorry.
Is that a punishment for men?
What's that?
the celibacy. It's an unnatural human condition that I feel has in the isn't the Catholic Church one of the only organized religions that has that? I mean,
Yeah.
the Jewish faith, the rabbis can be married, Protestant ministers can be married. I don't know about
But you know what?
Islam.
In the beginning of the
In the
church,
early
the
church,
priests
they were
did
all
marry.
They were married,
In
yeah.
the beginning church, yes.
Yeah.
And
Somebody
women
came
used to
along
host
and
the
said,
They were married to women with
And
all
women,
their
well, look at
money.
Mary Magdalene and all the women who are very much a part of being disciples of Jesus. I mean,
And
it's,
back in the day
Acts
when they
of
would
the
say, go to your
Apostles,
priest
Lydia.
if you're having marital problems.
right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They just didn't have to cut down on the abuse. On the
I
priest.
agree.
Basically, it became an economic thing that the priest would marry, they would have children, and the land would go to the children, and they were losing land. So, and then certainly it's a very controlling thing. Like you think about it, if you're like a Catholic priest and you're 45 years old and you've been, you're celibate, or like, where are you going? I mean, you're almost like you can't leave at that point, right? So, but Dave, after 5 or 6 children and all sorts of things, like celibacy is looking attractive. No.
Too late. Too late.
He'd be a millionaire. No.
Fact.
No, it's funny. I like Brennan Manning was. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I was just gonna say, so let's get back to, if you wanna get back to death, the topic anyway, but
We go off the field.
my point that you had made, which was really made, that I really linked onto, was the soul and or the being, the consciousness, and I in my lifetime, I think I have actually seen that once or twice, where I was part of someone's passing, and it actually was a period of time, from the heart stopping to the actual release of the spirit. And I know I'm gonna, this is not but it's crazy, but the point is that I wasn't the only one that actually experienced or actually talked about the spirit in the room and or leaving. Okay?
Yeah.
It was we looked at each other and, and we actually, took a gasp and said, did you actually feel that?
Yeah.
And it's almost a celebration, and like you were talking about, somebody is free.
Yeah.
Somebody, they're not hurting, they're not confused, they're not, going through all the trials and tribulations of, what we deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, just this overwhelming sense of being loved. No, yeah,
Yeah,
and
thank you.
and it's interesting too. Like, there's also reports of like people meeting someone. I'm getting choked up here. That they never knew, and then when they come back, they find out that it was like their grandfather that they never saw. And all of a sudden they're going through pictures or whatever, and they're going like, oh my God, that's the guy I saw when I had my near-death experiences. He goes, that's your grandfather. Like so that.
Oh gosh.
So and that's why I would never rebuff anyone that was willing to talk about and put themselves out there. And we never rebuff anybody that was trying to explain what spiritually they were experiencing. So,
Yeah.
I think you got to give everybody a chance. It might not always link up in your ears, and people explain things differently.
Yeah.
But the overall scenario is that you really have to be welcoming of what they're doing.
Yeah.
What they're saying.
So why don't we? Yeah.
I've been reading a lot about it, near-death experiences and stuff, and you always read, just as you described it, that you've enveloped in this light and it's all loving and unconditional. So how do you feel, like, is there a hell? It's always all loving.
Yeah.
So I find myself thinking, there's no hell, How
Yeah.
can there be a hell if it's all loving?
Yeah, I don't think that there is. I think that when you take people like Putin or Hitler or something like that, there's something so disturbed in them, so like a social. I mean, there are people that have no conscience. They're I don't know, born whatever. They do not have they don't have a conscience.
So how do you talk about us being conscious? Maybe that's one.
They don't have a conscience. So a conscience would be like a moral compass of like
the right or
empathy,
wrong.
like when you and I like this line of like that the quality of our human life of you being is directly related for our ability for empathy. Can I feel and care about another human being as if it were like myself or something like that, so, but there are people that, for whatever, why is there mental illness or a psychopath or a sociopath, and sometimes you become a sociopath. You're born a psychopath. So a sociopath comes from just abuse or something that happened along the way, environmental, and then they just have no conscience. I mean, like it's like we can't even comprehend. How can you imagine as a human being, you're sitting back and you know what's happening in the Ukraine, and you're the source of it all, and you just don't care. It's like
What's for dinner?
we can't what's for dinner? We can't even really we grasp it. So I don't know, but I don't believe. I think that why are they born that way, or what happens?
But Hitler and Putin were also God's children, as he loves us all, even the ones who misbehave.
Yeah, the sun rises on the just and the unjust.
I just came back from my doctor's office, and he's Ukrainian, a Jewish Ukrainian doctor, okay? His family, his brother and sister and other family are over in the Ukraine. He just came back from a month off so that he could try to get his family to come over here. There's no way. But we started talking about the situation a little bit, which was unusual because he doesn't usually have a conversation very much. And he said that Putin is suffering from a Napoleonic complex. And because he was given such power, it's now gone into this rampant. It's like unbelievable. And
Absolute
what they're really
power
hoping
corrupts
for, even though
absolutely.
it's not, it's violence, is that somebody from his military will take him out. Because the man is tortured. He's a tortured person. But that doesn't make it right.
No,
And it doesn't make it right either way.
Yeah.
The point of the matter is if you have family over there, you're gonna feel a lot different. You can, and I said, wow. So I reminded him of Queen Esther, because I said I went to see that program last year, and I said to him, remember Queen Esther, what she did in the circumstances, because I said to him, so many people were praying. So he said, yeah, but, there's more to be done than even just praying for circumstances.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like, may I? I think as we deal with love, and we agree, thank God, at this point, love, we have to deal with, there is evil.
Yeah.
So if we say, or if you believe, or if you have backup in some way, that we're all going to be with God, that's a tough one. And I don't know how evil, I mean, I think sometimes people choose paths. They choose to go away one way or another. We have to acknowledge, if there's so much good and so much love, that there is evil. Some of it is mental illness. Some of it is, and only God can judge that, knowing that. But what are we going to have? Is there going to be any place for evil? And is evil going to perpetuate itself? And there's got to be a little bit of the other side too. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to talk about love, and it is love, and that's what we're all here for. We love, and we believe that. Like, I never loved God. I believed in God, but I didn't love God when I was growing up. How do I love a God that was presented to me the way it was presented? I have come to love God because I believe that Jesus is a reflection of God. But I didn't love God, but I believed in him.
Right.
So where does the evil, the true evil that exists, you're saying they're not responsible for their actions? I mean, God does give us choice. I mean, we're free will people.
So where's the justice for evil?
I don't
Where's the
even know
justice
so
for-
much if it's justice, but what do you do with that? You say you never lose what you are, etc. And I know it's a tough one to deal with. We're dealing with all of the love and all of the. Where do you perceive the evil that is true evil?
Right. Well, you
Of
could say
choice.
you're not punished for your sin. You're punished by your sin. So that when you look at I think it's not so much a place, but a state of being. So that when you experience love and communion and coming together, it's a state of being. It's a dimension of being. So that when you look at evil, you look at a Putin or a Hitler, I mean, they're just in so much agony and misery by their choices that they're making. So they're in that state of being. Now, I don't know, but I mean, like, when you look at, like, when they leave their bodies, like, what happens to them, it's a great question, but obviously.
It's a tough question.
But
if that's what they're calling hell, that they will be in a state of hell, and I don't like the hell thing. That isn't it. I just
Well, there
I
is
just want to
state in,
really
like-
look at both sides of this. That because we all have thought this. I can't believe that we don't know. What do we do with it? What do we
Well,
do with
when you
it?
think of, like, first, when you look at, like, yeah, and let me ask you a question. Can you be here a little earlier next week?
Yeah. Oh, one.
One. Okay. If you can come at one, next week's going to be the last one, and we want to talk about, like, death and consciousness and bring this all together. If you could, like, take your nightly review and look at some of these things, and let's see if we could talk about. Can you recognize this emerging in your life? I mean, the point of, like, all these weeks, right, is we want to start to develop this in our life. Okay, so if we'll say we'll meet at 1:00, and then we can have a little bit more time.
And if you remind me, I have an answer for that too.
Okay.
Just my hypothesis on hell and heaven is when I was in the depths of my drinking, I was living in hell.
You made hell for
You were
yourself.
not living in
right.
the kingdom.
I have been rocketed into the fourth dimension, which is God's consciousness. And there's a saying in AA that religion is for people who are afraid of hell. Spirituality is for people who have been there.
They're very good.
I've been
Very
there,
good, Barbara.
so I have no fear.
Yeah.
Because I've already been there.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
So that's really good, and why don't we end with this? Like, what a lot of people are saying is so true, right? That we're responsible to grow and develop. We have to make that commitment to that, and life is fragile, right? We have to constantly work on don't want to be resentful, to forgive, and to grow and develop in our ability to love. Because, and I think that's really what we're here for, is to grow and help each other to grow. And I love that. You know, when you look at the prodigal son and the father gives it away, right? That love always grants freedom. So in order for there to be love, there has to be the possibility to not love. Otherwise, there's no, like, to say we just have to. All there is love.
Yeah.
So what, right? You have to choose to love. You know. So, Lord Jesus, we again thank you for opportunity to come here, and as we leave here, let us keep on reminding ourselves that every day, at every moment, you call us to choose to love. Amen.
Amen.
Okay.
Thank you.
You.
All right.
I gotta go wash my hands.
Wash your hands, everybody.
I always do.
I wash my hands.
Obviously, Drew does not.